The fourth one I want to just touch on is fear of the unknown. We become even less able to deal with the unknown than we already are. And candidly, human beings are really bad at dealing with the unknown. The way that we deal with the unknown is our brain goes ahead and makes assumptions. And our brain makes assumptions so fast that our conscious mind is not aware of why or how these assumptions are being made. That's already happening. You need to be trained on how to challenge your assumptions, how to spot them and then challenge them. So when you're following your career path and you're in this fearful state of mind, you have all this artificial competition you're dealing with, and you're making these trade-offs between stuff and the things that matter, your brain doesn't have the capacity to challenge its assumptions. And you end up making some very bad assumptions that can oftentimes sink your career before you really get started. You start looking at options between two jobs, and you weigh all the wrong factors, because you're making the wrong assumptions about what these jobs represent. I had a coaching engagement with a guy we call him John. John was a mid-level executive, large firm. John's boss was a member of the board, EVP of the company. John was a high potential. I spent the better part of a year with John. Great stuff, huge progress. His boss at the same time was also going through coaching. His boss was rude, tended to cut people off from meetings, had his own issues. So the boss is going through coaching, John's going through coaching. The boss is active in John's development, so this is very much a three-way team effort. John's boss is getting John put onto the right the right committees. He's bringing him into the right meetings. He's giving exposure to the right people that John needs exposure to be successful. And we have our closeout session. And we get through everything, and John's boss says, John, any last questions for me? And John says, yeah, why don't you trust me? You need to trust me more in meetings. And John's boss looks at me like, well, where'd this come from? I have no idea. That comment, this story is a happy ending. That comment sinks careers. John had sat in a meeting, had been cut off by his boss, and had made the assumption that all the coaching was a joke, it was a sham. And in his mind, he was calling his boss out on duplicity. And John's boss got called out. We talked about it. John's boss looked at him and said, you don't think I trust you because I talked over you in a meeting? I'm rude. I talk over people in meetings. That's why I'm going through coaching. It's not you, it's everybody. John says, yeah, but you took me off this project in front of everybody. His boss says, yeah. And a week later, I put you on a project reporting to the CEO. Would you want me to say in the meeting, hey, look, by the way, I'm taking John off this. I'm going to put him on this new project coming up with the CEO. Do you know what kind of infighting we would have had? Everybody would have jockeyed for it. You never would have gotten it. I had to just pull you off. And I had to be a little bit rude to end the conversation because I didn't want anybody asking questions about why I was pulling you off. I just wanted you to appear on this other project with the CEO. And John went like this. Oh. John was lucky. Usually the boss looks at you when you say something like that and says, you don't think I trust you. You are projecting your lack of trust in me back to you. I think we're done. And careers just end. Assumptions are nefarious. Our fear of the unknown doesn't even feel like fear. That's how insidious fear of the unknown is. Fear of the unknown feels like yesterday when you made that really brilliant comment, you couldn't have said anything dumber. When you follow your career path, you get too far gone along your career path, you lose your ability to gut check and to check your assumptions and make sure you're making the right ones. So that's living your career path. We get there because we've been sold on it, because organizations need us to do it, because intuitively we understand we have to play the game. We're gonna check part of us at the door as soon as we become part of the collective. The problem becomes when we start following the path and we start saying, look, just give me my box. I want to strip out all the things that are uniquely me. I will try to fit the average. That's when you have the problem. Because that's when all the tension flows back to you and you start having a heightened fear of the unknown, heightened fear of failure, heightened fear of loss, heightened level of competition. Here's the alternative. So what do we do? Well, you know from the title of the talk, I want you to live your story. This may sound a little motivational. It's not. It's going to get real practical in about 2 minutes. I want you to live your story. Story structure looks like this. English majors, you never thought you were going to use your degree for business? Congratulations, here you are. This is Freytag's pyramid. Gustav Freytag was a 19th century German author, And he theorized, discovered, thought that all stories, at least in Western literature, follow the same arc. And they do. Your favorite story follows this arc. And it generally goes like this. Stories start with exposition. The exposition is not a story, it's just a description of what is. This is scenery. This is the scene of the movie where the family's sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast together. It's a totally normal day like any other. Then comes the inciting point. And the inciting point is where your story starts. The guide wire that's been guiding this family up to this point snaps. Normal is broken. Our story begins. Once the story begins, we have a hero, and the hero is trying to go from the left side of the screen to the right side. We're trying to go from exposition to resolution. The hero is trying to get back to normal. I've modified Freitag's pyramid a little bit. I've raised resolution up because I think if you're going to go through the trouble, the end game should be a little bit better than where you started. That's just my contribution. But basically what happens is our hero is trying to get across the screen, and things start happening that push our hero away. So while our hero is getting closer to his destination or her destination, he or she is also getting pushed further away from it. It's called rising conflict. Until we reach the climax. And at the climax, our hero has never been closer nor further away from where he or she is trying to go at that moment. This is the scene in the movie where the good guy and the bad guy are done fighting. The good guy thinks he has won, and he turns around and, oh my gosh, not only is the bad guy gone, but the bad guy had the extra knife in the shoe and is coming at the good guy, and the good guy's already thrown down his weapons and is defenseless. That's the climax. It's the big chase scene. It's the big decision that keeps you up at night. That's where the story, that's where the ending is determined. That's where comedies and tragedies and dramas and epics are determined. Not at the beginning, at the climax. Then we have following action, we're denouement, we're tying up loose ends, and finally we've got resolution. This is the story structure. And this is why the story structure is important. It's important because of this picture. This is a pretty well-known optical illusion. Those lines, those horizontal lines, are actually parallel. They look like they angle. They're not. They're parallel. If I asked you to build this, and you looked at it, and you said, huh, those horizontal lines look like they angle, you would have a devil of a time trying to build this. If you looked at it and understood it for what it was, you could build it. You'd still have to go through the motions. You'd still have to carve the blocks, make the white ones white, make the black ones black, put them all together, but your plans would work. This is the difference between living a career path and living a story. When you follow your career path, you're acting as if those lines are angled. You're making plans in your career that won't work. Your perception is off. So now you have real issues and you have noise in the system. You have this amplified fear. You've got this artificial competition. You've got this fear of loss that you really don't need because you're trying to have things like cars and corporate expense accounts do the duty of loving relationships that they weren't built to fill those voids. You put all of this noise in the system, it blocks you. If you live your story, it doesn't mean go get another job. It doesn't mean quit. It doesn't mean stand up on the rooftops and shout, I am me. It doesn't mean go paint your hair purple. It means understand who you are, where you are in the arc, and embrace it. Live your story. Understand part of you doesn't fit in this box, and part of you doesn't fit in that box, and you need to accommodate both. Here are the benefits. Here's the case. I want to walk real quickly through those same four stressors that we just talked about. We talked about fear of the unknown, how quickly you make assumptions. Well, guess what? When you live your story, you embrace the unknown. You want it. Bring it. Stories are judged by the twists and turns that they have. Sixth Sense, great movie. Even better when we discover Bruce Willis is dead. Sorry if I just ruined the movie. John, my client, had he been sitting in that room, in that meeting, he gets cut off from his boss, by his boss. He's got a problem on his hands. But instead of saying, I gotta figure this out, my boss doesn't trust me, this is a problem, he can sit back and he can do exactly what he ended up doing in the coaching session with his boss and me. He can pull up the proverbial popcorn and say, so that's how my story is going to experience a plot twist. I didn't see that one coming. Thought my boss was on my side. And with that presence of mind, John could have done what he did with us. He could have said, well, you know what, it turns out that there's probably a number of reasons for this. My boss might just be being rude. My boss might not realize he's being rude.